As you can tell from the title of today's video, this is not going to be the same as most of my other videos, which are quite optimistic, upbeat, and so on, because that was not a clickbait title. Unfortunately, there is one single thing that has destroyed my quite successful eBay business in less than a month. That's right, less than 30 days. So let's get into it. I'll tell you right here, right off the top, what that thing was, and then I'll spend some time pulling back the curtain to show you what actually happened and why I'm saying it has destroyed my eBay business. So the thing is tariffs. It is more specifically the change that happened on August the 29th of this year, which is when the de minimis exemption was eliminated. So prior to that date, so all the way up till August, end of August this year, any item that was shipped into the US from a foreign country, regardless of what country that was manufactured in, if the item was under $800, there were no duties, tariffs, those sorts of things applied. So that was the de minimis, meaning like small amount, under $800, that was exempt from tariffs, duties, that sort of thing. So with the elimination of this exemption, I'm sure you've figured out what that means is all items, regardless of value, so even very small de minimis dollar items, $5, $10, doesn't matter, all have duties applicable. Now, when this was announced, I believe it was in early August, I got a pit in my stomach because I had a pretty good feeling that this was going to be the outcome, and sadly, it has proven to be the case. So let me tell you what it means. It means that if you are a buyer in the United States and you purchase something from a seller outside of the United States, and the item that you are purchasing was not made in the United States, so made in China, made in Canada, made in France, made in Italy, doesn't matter, just not made in the US, then you as the US buyer must pay import duties on that item. Again, regardless of how much the item costs. So however small it may be, there are going to now be duties payable. So what did I do about this? When I learned about this, I mean, all sellers outside of America were quite concerned when we heard this update. So what I did is a few days before that date, August 29th, I went into my eBay store. And if you've watched one of my very recent videos, I'll put a link up here, it talked about everything we accomplished in the summer and how my business had grown tremendously up to the end of August. So I had over 1,300 items listed, have over 1,300 items listed on eBay. And what I did before this date was I went in, and thankfully eBay has a bulk editing function. I went into all of my listings and added a paragraph that warned US buyers about these new duties that would be payable, and making it very clear. I used my friend ChatGPT AI to help me with some really good wording around this information so that buyers would be aware that it was their responsibility to pay for these duties, tariffs, fees, whatever might be associated with this, and that it was not included in my selling price or the shipping fee. So that's what I did, and here's what I ended up finding out when all of this went live. This new rule actually didn't just impact goods that were sold on August 29th or later. In fact, it impacted items that were, call it, in the system if they had not already crossed the border by that date. So meaning if I sold something to a buyer on, let's say, August the 27th, and it took a couple of days to make its way through the UPS system and get to the border crossing, and that happened not on the 27th or not on the 28th, but that happened on the 29th or later, that buyer was now going to be slapped with these import duties. US buyers, of course, I'm talking about. If I say buyer in the video, I'm talking about US buyers, okay? So that got a little tricky because a couple of things did happen. August, again, watch that last video of mine a couple videos ago that talks about how successful I became by August. I was selling a lot of items. I was shipping out stuff on a daily basis. So that's a bit of the background, what it was, what it means. Now let me just cut to the aggregate results. What I saw is quite a significant drop in sales. So again, I'm just going to quote aggregate numbers that eBay sends. These are gross sales. It doesn't matter. The point is to talk about the drop, not what's actually in the numbers. eBay reports my August gross sales are $5,300. My September 2025 gross sales, $2,700. That's a 50% drop. Now, could there be other factors in there? Of course there could. But generally, as we move into September and then Q4, sales are ramping up, not declining. So that was a 50% drop in gross sales from August to September of 2025. I also took a look at the number of items that sold. Now this is maybe a little less of an indicator because items are available for all different prices, but nevertheless, I sold 65 unique items in August, and that dropped by 30% to 45 items in September. Now, there were normally in all of my past, many months of selling on eBay, I have always estimated, and then I did some analysis to confirm, that 80 to 90% of my buyers on my particular eBay store were from the US. Don't I love you all in the US? And plus I love traveling to the US. So please don't understand any of what I'm saying today as, any kind of negative feelings towards my US neighbors. That's not it at all. But again, 80 to 90% of my buyers were from the US. Makes sense. Canada is very small compared to the US, right? What I saw in September, so out of that 45 items that I sold, 17 were to Canadian buyers. Never sold that many things to Canadian buyers ever. And what that actually represented was a drop in the number of US buyers from 80 or 90% down to 60% of my items sold. So do I think there was an impact directly related to this particular change? Yes, I do. I'm not saying I can quantify it exactly, but yes, it definitely had an impact. Now, what else besides the numbers? What else did I, and probably many, many other resellers who are shipping from outside of America, well, what else I experienced was upset buyers. Unfortunately, despite, having messages to try and inform and educate buyers about these new tariffs and duties, they didn't read it or didn't see it or didn't understand it or whatever, doesn't matter. But nevertheless, very upset when they learned at point of delivery that there was all of this extra money payable, okay? So that's one. Number two, shipping nightmares. And I sound passionate because it has been a nightmare the last, almost 2 months now. Here we sit on October 28th when I'm recording this. What do I mean by shipping nightmares? Well, let me count the ways. Number one, prior to August 29th, eBay.ca, so the Canadian eBay site, announced that we would no longer be able to use Canada Post for, and that means across the border USPS, for shipping to US buyers effective, it was like before the 29th. Reason being, Canada Post was not equipped to suddenly start managing and handling and administering the tariffs that were now applicable to all of these items under $800. So there went the most inexpensive shipping option, number one. We had to then primarily default to UPS. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but at least here in Canada, in my experience on my eBay store, the eBay shipping labels are significantly, and I'm talking like half, cheaper than FedEx or Purelator, which, by the way, is owned by Canada Post, in case you didn't know that, but still available to be shipped because it's a courier company, not a mail delivery company. Anywho, shipping nightmares, having to deal with everything through UPS. So what it meant was my listings actually still showed that Canada Post was an option. And most buyers, of course, choose the most inexpensive shipping option. So cut to, they're purchasing an item from me, choosing the Canada Post shipping option. When I go to actually ship the item, Canada Post is not an option for me as a seller. So that was an oops on my part. And I now have to buy a more expensive UPS shipping label. So is what it is. It wasn't like I was losing money. It was just, another thing to have to deal with. Plus, hey, now do I sound like I'm whining? Maybe. But the Canada Post drop-off is like half a mile from my house. Super, super convenient. I drive by it multiple times per day when I go anywhere. Versus the UPS drop-off point is, it's not terribly far, but it's a good, 5 to 10 minutes each way. So it's just more of a thing, okay? So that's all wrapped up in shipping nightmares. So as you might imagine from what I've just described, and I'm gonna get into some very specific examples of buyer situations, shipping situations, just so you can understand what's really involved here. It created a lot of stress. That's the other thing here. It is all around for me as a seller, for all these buyers, for the shipping companies. I mean, they're making money, but still everybody is having a lot of stress around this change. So that's just a bit of a reality check on what happened just before and after August the 29th. So let's actually get into it. Let's start talking about, okay, fine. So buyers are not happy that they have to pay duty. My sales are down. Let's just talk about how many buyer issues I ended up having. So before this point, I have only had, I can't even recall another recent one besides one item that was my fault. This has nothing to do with tariffs. And that was a coffee carafe that I did not ship correctly. And that's one of my top 10 reseller errors. So watch my very last video that talks about those errors if you haven't seen them. And this is one of them. Shoddy shipping, as I called it, where I did not properly package the item. Beautiful item, sold for $70 plus shipping, and had to get refunded because check out how it ended up arriving at the buyer. Not good. Anyway, that was just to illustrate the point that have I made mistakes? Yes, one. Okay. Now I'm going to get into some examples of all these customer problems, buyer issues that I had in the month of September that were nothing to do with the quality of my products, nothing to do with my own pricing of how I'm pricing my items. And even though people complain, not to do with the shipping cost, and nothing to do with the level of service that I'm providing to my buyers. Rather, all to do with this tariff situation. Okay, so first I'm going to show you what should have been a really simple sale, okay? It was a set of 6 stainless steel dinner forks, certain brand accents, made in Japan, vintage. So these 6 forks, yes, dinner forks, sold for $24.99 plus shipping. And I sent them Friday, August 29th. Oh my goodness, that was the D-Day of all of this tariff change, the de minimis change. So it was dropped off on that day, which actually means it was either purchased earlier that day or possibly even the day before. Anyway, cut to, I'm watching the tracking. I still try to keep an eye on my items periodically just to see, make sure they're getting where they're supposed to go and just to be prepared in case a buyer ever reaches out. And cut to, let's see, I'm looking at shipping, and it's showing on September the 4th that, I'll read it to you, and I'll put it up here on the screen. Your package is pending release from a government agency. Once they release it, your package will be on its way. That's new. Never seen that before. Anyway, long story short, as you can see, this package that I shipped out to a buyer in the US arrived and landed back on my doorstep on September 18th. So that is almost 3 weeks later. Now, in the meantime, I had spoken with someone at the UPS office, and they said to me when I was dropping off a bunch of packages when I got home from Hawaii, "Are you aware of these shipping situations?" And I'm like, no, sorry, been on vacation. What's going on? Well, apparently, I cannot vet whether this is true or not. I'm just sharing what I was told. Apparently, they said at that point in time, and this is mid-September, there were 14 semi-trailer trucks full of packages stuck at the US border because I don't know exactly why, whether US Customs was unable or just somehow not processing them. And so there was this basically bottleneck where no packages were getting through. And wouldn't you know it, that's how one ended up back on my doorstep, is it never made it through and just sat there, came back. Now, okay, so I have my item back, but meanwhile, the buyer is still looking for their item that they purchased and paid shipping on. So I'm really in a quandary. What am I to do? So I get on the phone with eBay and I say, let me tell you what's going on here, and explain the situation. The representative was excellent, and they were, looking at all the notes, all the different, facts that they had at their disposal around tariff situations. And they had to admit they had no notes, nothing, no guidance on what to do in a situation like this. Because of course I'm saying my buyer should not have to pay for shipping again. And me as the seller, I've already bought my shipping label and sent the item as per normal. I don't think I should have to buy the label again and be out that money. So I will say this, points for eBay in this situation. The representative, and I had 2 packages like this, actually refunded me the shipping label that I had purchased and had land back on my doorstep to allow me to repurchase a new shipping label and get this item on its way. So that happened. Anywho, what happened next is, as I'll throw up here, you can see on, October the 3rd, I see that this buyer does not wish to receive this item. They have refused delivery. This is the first time I was dealing with this, okay? Let me throw up another little graphic here to show you why the buyer refused shipping. Recall, they paid $24.99 Canadian for that item. Well, UPS was asking them for, as you see, US dollars, $26.70. So compared to what the buyer paid for the original item and even the shipping, which was 31 US dollars, this was almost doubling what they had already paid for the item in duties. So can I be mad at this buyer? No. Would I really want to pay 31 plus 27, what is that, 58 US dollars for some dinner forks? No. I'm going to guess you would not either. So this is what happened, okay? They say they don't want the product and they refuse delivery. Well, now what, okay? Here's what. Have I seen this package since I shipped it again on September 22nd? No, I have not. It is lost. I have been on the phone. This is me, looking very frustrated, on the phone with UPS multiple times to try to find out, where is this package? What am I to do? And yeah, package missing in action. Still shipped on September 22nd. No idea where it is. So the position this puts me in is I don't have my item. So if I can't resell it potentially. So the buyer, I'm waiting for my item. The buyer's waiting for their refund, which I'm not prepared to give until I either get the item back or I get reimbursed by UPS for this lost package. So stressful, yes. Very frustrating, yes, for everyone, like I said. So you might think, well, that was just a one-off. That, you shipped that right on the day, August 29th. Well, let me tell you about another one, okay? Let's talk about a straw sun hat. So Wallaroo is a really fun hat brand if you're not familiar with it. And I've sold one before and found another one. Here it is. So my buyer in Florida paid $24 plus shipping for this item. And I sent it out. This buyer was super nice and messaged me on, you'll see here, the 9th of September, saying, I am so sorry, but I am refusing delivery of this item because UPS has asked me to pay $42 US in duties in order to receive my item. So she said, I'm refusing that. Clearly that's, doesn't make sense. And I don't blame them. So I checked my UPS tracking status and put it up here. Yes, they're saying on September 6th, it was actually refused. The buyer messaged me on the 9th. So then cut to, when do I actually get this package back? Well, shocker, this one came back relatively quickly. I received it back on September 16th. And as you can see here, I refunded on September 17th the $24 purchase price. So what does this mean? We have a disappointed buyer who didn't get the item that they had purchased. We have a disappointed and frustrated seller who just did a bunch of work and refunded the buyer and made $0. Is what it is, right? Nothing we can do about it. But now you understand. Let's go on to example number 3. So we'll throw it up here on the screen. This is, I don't really know this brand. I don't know if you do. Monos expandable packing cubes. This was a set, $10 plus shipping. I don't typically sell. If you've watched any of my other videos, in fact, I'll throw up like a recent high profits thrift flip sales video. I don't usually sell things for $10, but whatever, don't ask me why. Somehow this ended up getting purchased and listed, and it's fine. So $10 plus shipping. Well, same thing happens. I'm watching the tracking, and I'm not seeing any, signs of delivery. What I do see, and we'll throw it up here, is UPS indicating that there is $30.68 US in import fees payable on this packing cube set. Now, again, as you can see up here, what the buyer paid for the original item plus shipping was $21 US. And now they're being asked to pay $31 in duties. Would you? I know I wouldn't. So again, I'm not mad at the buyer who says, are you kidding me? No. So cut to September 20th, I see this notification on UPS that says the receiver has refused the package. Now, in the meantime, I'm messaging with this buyer on eBay and saying, it looks like there's duties payable, so on and so forth. And then I see this and I say, it looks like you refused the shipment. And they, again, put up a message. I'll throw up the message they sent me, was that yes, they were being asked to pay like this $31 just about because it was an international purchase. But here's the point I want to make on this one. As per this buyer's message you're seeing here, they were prepared to actually pay it. And unfortunately, the driver could not accept cash, could not accept credit card. So these duties aren't paid. The driver's showing up at the buyer's house and saying, I can't give this package to you until you pay duty. And then they aren't able to actually take a payment of the duty. Is your mind boggled? Mine is boggled as to how this is actually supposed to work. Anyway, apparently this buyer was told they had to call UPS. So they tried. I mean, give kudos to this buyer. They really did try. They tried, nobody answered, and they're like, you know what, I'm giving up. This is a set of $10 Canadian packing cubes. I'm not doing this. So, hence, refuse the delivery. The package ends up on its way back to me, or so they say. So now, this is all happening, September. Cut to September 23rd. My plans were, and I did, shut down my eBay store for a planned 3-week shutdown because I was going to Ontario to help my mom and dad out. My mom was getting a total knee replacement surgery. So I knew I was going to be out of town and I was going to just close my store because I would be away far too long to let anybody buy anything and have that much of a delay with shipping. So now, of course, with all this going on, was I sad to close my store down? No. I did not want any more of these kinds of issues that I had already seen start to trickle in by September 23rd. So anyway, I'm in Ontario. I'm helping out my mom and my dad and very busy just, looking after them and the household and helping her with her recovery and all the things. And I'm like, suddenly, oh my goodness, I got to check into these eBay things. Like, what is going on? I'm not getting any emails. I'm not seeing any, messaging from eBay. So, long story short, put it up here. Several frustrating calls to UPS later, and nobody has any idea where this package is. So, I file a claim for a lost package. That was on October the 9th. 19 days ago, no updates, no answers, no package. So, there we go. That's the story of the packing cubes. Let's move on. I've got a couple more, and they're all sort of different things. So I don't know. I don't mean to sound so negative because I'm not normally a negative person, but I just want to be real and transparent about how difficult this has actually been. Next item up. This was a great sale. I was so happy when I made this sale. So throw it up here. It is, I'll read it out. A pair of vintage diesel Remy shoes, like sneakers, suede, leather, casual, low top. I mean, don't they sound like cool retro shoes? They were. Anyway, this buyer paid $80 plus shipping. These are Canadian dollars for these cool retro sneakers, okay? Now, of course, the reason you're hearing about it is because it didn't go well. I'm going to throw up the message that I got from the buyer. And they're talking about, supposedly they're looking at the tracking and UPS has supposedly tried to deliver this 3 times. They've been on the phone with them now for an hour, and you can see I've circled it in red here. They were messaging me to say, like, hey, there was no warning on this, purchase of mine that I would have to pay about $60, ouch, in customs to receive the package. Now, I had a bit of a, heart flutter when I read that message and went, oh no, did I make a mistake? I knew I had put that blanket message on all my listings, but was it not on there for some reason? Well, next graphic will show you that yes, in fact, it was. So this is an exact copy of what the wording that was in my listing, as I alluded to in the beginning of this video, really calling out the fact that US buyers need to be aware that any customs, duties, import taxes, and fees that might be payable on this item are their responsibility. They are not included in the purchase price. They are not included in the shipping cost. So again, not that I'm trying to rub the buyer's nose in it, far from it, but I am having to protect myself as a seller to, kind of gently remind them that unfortunately it was there. Not sure if you just didn't see it. So kind of get myself off the hook as far as, someone trying to come after me for, any kind of misrepresentation or something like that. Anyway, this one became the bane of my existence. This particular pair of shoes, while a great sale, they became the most unpopular shoes I've ever known, because and I'll show you the summary. Trust me, I'm not going to go through it. As far as the tracking and what was going on with this package, it left Calgary on September 10th. So we'll throw that up here. Actually, pardon me, I dropped it off at UPS in this first screenshot on September 4th. It didn't leave Calgary until September 10th. Why? I don't know. I think it was the 4th Labor Day, maybe. But why it took 6 days to even leave Calgary? That's anybody's guess. Ask UPS, right? All right, next screen. We can see blah, 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 blah. Crosses the border into North Dakota on September 11th. So, hey, that part went fast. Left Calgary on the 10th, got to North Dakota on the 11th. So it's now in the US. Next screen, you can see on the 16th, it's now made it to Brooklyn, New York. So, you know, as far as the buyer's concerned, I shipped it on the 4th. This is 12 days. Not great, but not the end of the world, right? I know from looking at it that it actually made it from Calgary to New York in 6 days. Pretty good if you ask me. Anyway, it says out for delivery. Now, remember that buyer's note a minute ago that said UPS was showing they tried to deliver it 3 times? Well, yeah, here's what happened. Cut to the next screen. Now it's talking about on the 18th of September, the driver was not able to receive payment. And by payment, we're talking about duties here. A final attempt will be made. And like I'm, again, at my mom and dad's, helping out, so on and so forth. And I'm suddenly reading this, you know, days later going, oh my goodness, what is going on with this package? So 33 messages go back and forth between me and the buyer. Me saying, they say they've tried to deliver it 3 times. Is your address correct on the shipping label? Them saying, yes, I never have problems with packages. If I'm not home when they ring, they just leave it at the coffee shop on the main floor of my building. This is in Brooklyn, New York, right? And I'm like, okay, I phone UPS again and say, hey, leave it at the coffee shop if the person's not home. We both, me and the buyer, really want these shoes to get to this person now that they've paid for these duties, because they had, in the meantime, paid online. Well, throw up another page. You can see that there's out for delivery, all kinds of things. Import duties have now been paid. We're trying to deliver, the receiver's not available, like on and on. And I'll tell you this, I called UPS 3, if not 4 times on this one item on different days. And every single person I talked to, I got a completely different story about where this package was, what had happened to it up to that point. They were saying it would be delivered the next day. I would let the buyer know. Buyer would say next day, didn't come. Hence the 33 messages that went back and forth. Because every time UPS is telling me it's going to go the next day, I tell the buyer, it doesn't go. I call them again. Like, you know, you can understand, right? Why I'm showing a graphic here of my head exploding. Anyway, I had all but given up on this, and I was now, you know, weeks later coming back to Calgary. My mom's doing great, by the way. She is a champ. She's going to be 79 in December, and she barely ever needed a cane. Amazing woman. Anyway, all of a sudden, randomly out of the blue, on October the 14th. Remember I initially shipped this on September the 4th? Well, on October the 14th, wouldn't you know it, this blessed buyer messages me on eBay to say, I called UPS and they said they would deliver it, and they did. Well, I mean, choirs are singing, right? What a stressful experience. So in the meantime, with all the calls I was having with UPS and no resolution whatsoever for weeks, I had called eBay and said, what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't have the package. The buyer doesn't have the package. The buyer is talking about canceling the credit card transaction, which I don't know what that would do to me. But anyway, eBay's not just going to fork over money to the credit card when there's all this, you know, tracking shipping stuff going on. So I was instructed by eBay to tell my buyer to open a case of item not received. So I'm following all these instructions. I'm making multiple calls to eBay, and just like calling any customer service, that's not fun either, usually. Anyway, long story short, we went through all this with eBay to try to get the buyer the protection under, what do they call it? The buyer protection plan. And eBay pens the case because there's still updates on the shipping tracking UPS site. And of course the case gets closed because the item gets delivered. So my, stress level through the roof dealing with this. I don't even know how many times I had to touch this particular sale transaction to, try and resolve things, to do the best job I can for my buyer. I mean, wow. Is there really any other way to describe the impact that this one change had on this whole buying and selling process? Oh, well, is what it is. Now, the last one I'm going to share is a more recent one, more recent than those, which happened, late August, early September into September. Let's throw it up. This was another great sale. This was a brand called G4. You may or may not be familiar with it. And these were leather women's golf shoes. So they had soft spikes on the bottom. Super cool, right? Red, white, and blue stars, or silver kind of. Anyway, super cool. Patriotic, I think, golf shoes. So I sold it for $70 plus shipping. Fantastic. I accepted an offer for $70. Happy to do so. Bought them at the bins, just so you know. Anyway, for whatever reason on that one, I don't know how, but that message I talked about that was in my description warning US buyers about these tariffs was not in there. So I don't know what happened with my bulk update on eBay, but it wasn't in there. So what I did, let me throw it up on the screen, was immediately when I saw the sale and even before I shipped the shoes out, I sent the buyer this message in blue explaining, I accepted your offer, happy to take it, but since you're a US buyer, I need to make you aware of this, and so on. Now, I waited until my shipping deadline for this buyer to respond and acknowledge that, but eBay puts, I think I say that I do 3-day shipping. Usually it's much faster than that. But anyway, the 3 days were up and I had to ship it or else I'd get a strike on my eBay account for not shipping in time. So I'm like, well, I told you, you didn't respond, must be okay. Yeah, right. Anyway, I shipped out the shoes, didn't hear anything. 29th of September. So I shipped it on the 16th. 13 days later, I get a message from the buyer, and here it is. I don't know, I will return the item. You didn't see this message for 13 days. That's unfortunate. And now, because I'm looking at the tracking and I see that UPS is actually trying to deliver it to you today, now you're telling me that you didn't know you're going to return the item because they didn't know about the fees. Okay, you know what? Benefit of the doubt. I'm not here to be mad at my buyers, although I admit that was a little bit frustrating because I tried to prevent all this and it still didn't work. Anyway, you can see my response that I understand. Again, my goal here is not to alienate someone or upset someone or get negative feedback over even a $70 item. I prize my perfect feedback score and my top rated seller status far more than I do the profit on one single transaction. So even though my international policy is no refunds, I say to the buyer, I will refund it as soon as I get the item back. And let me throw up here the excerpt from the UPS tracking site of why the buyer said no. You can see the original item that they bought for 70 Canadian dollars plus shipping works out to $68 US. And UPS was asking for, yes, over $48 USD in duties. So like that's, more than two-thirds or so of the total price they already paid for this item. So I understand why these US buyers are like, nah, no way, not happening, right? So they refused the shipment. You can see they did send me a note on September 30th to say, UPS has picked it up again, please take note. And I'm like, okay, as I said, I'll send you a refund when I get the item back. Well, check out this next note. How many different line items and transactions are there on this particular item's UPS tracking status? Yeah, 49. Almost 50 different in, out, here, there, this, that, the other. Okay, so that's just like stressful just to even try to make sense of looking at that on the UPS tracking site. But don't worry, don't click off, don't leave me. I'm not going to go through it all. I'll throw up a quick little summary I put together of the key dates in this particular transaction. September 16, I drop off the package. September 18, they have the package already in Seattle. So cross the border nice and quick. That's great. Then you can see my little graphic here of that package went from Calgary to Seattle to Tacoma, to Portland, to Roseburg, all in Oregon, I believe, to Sacramento, to Sylmar, and finally to Gardena, California. So this package has been around, shall we say. And on the 23rd, so a week after I dropped it off, it is now saying that it's out for delivery in Gardena, California. Now it comes back then and says, receiver was not available for delivery. And the reason I think the receiver had to be available, not because I need a signature or anything like that as a shipper, but so they could pay the duty, okay? So that's the message I see on the 23rd. Ditto on the 24th, again on the 25th, and once again on the 26th. So every day I'm seeing these messages that say, the receiver was not available for delivery. We will try again tomorrow, and again, and again, and again. Finally, on the 29th is when I see the message, as I've already shared with you, that the buyer does not want it and they have refused the delivery. So yeah, 49 different shipping statuses all along the way. And this is where we end up. Don't want the product. Okay, understandable, right? So let's just throw up the experience again. So there's 10 plus messages back and forth between me and the buyer, between when they refused it on September 29th and October 23rd was the last one. So back and forth. Do you have it? Have you received the item back yet? No, I haven't. Have you received the item back? No, I haven't. I will call UPS because there's nothing useful on the website. I called UPS. UPS is saying, oh, now you have to put in a claim. So I try to put in a claim and then they have no record of the claim and they don't email me a confirmation of the claim. Anyway, I'm whining. Yes, I am. Anyway, throw it up again. Frustration. Multiple calls to eBay, what I'm supposed to do with this. Multiple calls to UPS. And the final status, where does it stand today? Well, I put in a claim for the lost package on October the 9th, again, 19 days ago, and we don't know where it is. No updates, no communication, no changes to the tracking status. So this cute little set of golf shoes is somewhere, who knows, right? So that was, wow, a lot of negativity. I have to be honest with you. Let me share my heart here. I went back and forth with myself about whether or not to even make this video because my channel is generally very encouraging, very upbeat, very positive, very optimistic. That's how I am as a person. And this one is negative Nelly all the way. Apologies to anyone whose name is Nelly. I don't mean that in a bad way. Anyway, I decided it's the truth of what's going on. And I don't want to pretend on YouTube that everything is great and everything is fine and I'm going to go thrifting and I'm selling and this and that and the other when since, September, I haven't. And this is what's actually been going on, okay? So let me recap it for you. It started with orders that didn't cross the border by that August 29th date, even if they were purchased before that date of that change. I saw an immediate drop in sales and the number of items that were selling. I've had to deal with angry messages, multiple, repeat, angry messages from buyers and upset customers, sort of for many various different reasons, as you have heard. I have had to manage the stress for myself personally of constantly having to call eBay, having to call UPS multiple times, multiple items, multiple times per item, and still, have no resolution. At this date, October 28th, I still have lost packages. I didn't even share all of them. There are more than what I've shared here in today's video. And I have to date received one. The hat came back. That was early days. And I've received one other item back that I didn't even talk about today. But all the other ones, still outstanding. No idea where they are. So it means no refund for the buyers yet because I don't have the item back. And I have put in claims. I've had to file these complex claims, and I'm now being asked to provide additional information to try to get a refund from UPS for losing the package. And yeah, so I told you I closed my store when I was going to Ontario to help out my parents for 3 weeks. But I'm going to be honest with you. When I came back, my store was supposed to be turning back on, when did I get back? October the 15th, I think I got back. 16th, shut her right back down again for the foreseeable future. Why? Because I'm still dealing with all of this. I haven't even made any new sales, and I'm still dealing with all of this from these past sales. So I just, for my own peace of mind and sanity, said no more. I cannot handle dealing with this anymore. So that is where we stand of today. Now, I worked in consulting for, over 25 years. So I'm not a person to just present a problem without at least thinking about or strategizing about what might be some potential solutions here. And I'm going to ask all of you to chime in here as well. So where do I go from here? Well, am I going to just throw in the towel? I'm not ready to do that yet. Things could change. We've actually seen that happen. And again, I'm not being political here at all. That's not the purpose of this video, but we have seen different governmental policies and changes get reversed, get, changed. So that could happen at some point in time. So, not ready to make any knee-jerk reactions or make any rash emotional decisions, even though, of course, I am very frustrated. So what can I do? Well, option one, I could just sell on eBay. I have a Canadian eBay store, ebay.ca. Instead of selling to the US, I could turn off all shipping to the US and just sell to Canadian or potentially even international. If you're a Canadian reseller, have you heard anything more about eBay's international shipping program? Because it was supposed to be coming to Canada. I got some news update or something about that, but I have heard nothing further. So tell me in the comments if you know anything about that. Anyway, that was me on a tangent. I could sell to Canada and potentially beyond and just avoid right now selling to the US. That's one option. The downside of that is that Canada is 1/10 of the size in terms of population, most metrics, compared to the US. I do not expect I would reach even close to the same level as I have in the past with the whole North American market. So that's one thing. I could sell more on Poshmark. I have a Poshmark Canada store. Poshmark, again, is different than eBay. My Canadian eBay store allows me to sell anywhere in the world. I don't have to have an eBay store in those other countries. Poshmark is different. My Poshmark Canada store can only sell to Canadian customers, and which isn't a problem now because I'm not looking to sell to the US. But do I sell more on Poshmark? I've had success on Poshmark in the past. I don't love the 20% fee. I don't love the fact that on anything under $10, they charge no, never mind $10. On any item, their minimum fee is $4. So if you sold something at $10, they would take $4 and you would be left with $6. I don't love those fees on Poshmark, but it's an option. Let's give it the credit. It is a viable option. I could sell on Marketplace with local sales, especially for bigger items or, things that might be useful to folks that live in my area. That's another option. I've had success again on Marketplace. Maybe I should do another video. Would you all like to see a video of sales I've made on Poshmark and Marketplace? Because I focus a lot here on eBay, but I do have past success on those platforms as well. Anyway, I could just try again with US sellers and start selling to the US again. Spoiler, I don't see myself doing that anytime soon. particularly when I'm still dealing with outstanding issues from almost 2 months ago. Never mind the selling. What else can I do in this situation? Again, if you haven't watched any of my prior videos, or if you've missed it, I have a pretty significant death pile. I'll put a link to a video up here that talks about that. But I could be spending my time, since my eBay store is closed down right now, I could be spending my time going through all my 1,300 listings, as well as all the 2,000 plus items in my death pile in the storage unit, to do a major purge. Like, really get some strict criteria about what is worth keeping to potentially sell down the road on eBay if something changes, or on Poshmark, or on Marketplace, or other platforms potentially as well. So that is another option. And finally, I could just get rid of it all. I could just say, you know what? I'm choosing to not be a reseller anymore. That feels a little bit emotional, reactionary, but there are some steps I could take. So people, thank you, viewers who've recommended things to me in the past, like gathering up all kid stuff that I have, or baby stuff, kid stuff, and taking it to Once Upon a Child, seeing if I can get some money for it there. Taking clothing, shoes, maybe some handbags to Plato's Closet, see if they'll give me anything to offload some of those items. I could start looking into consignment. And another thing I have thought of personally is, I don't know if I would do it on Marketplace or where, but maybe sell some reseller lots of items, like a lot of shoes, a lot of clothing, a lot of, I don't know, handbags, whatever, by sort of category, and just, kind of take the approach of like, hey, on average, if I got this stuff at the bins for like, let's just call it $2 to $3, I'll sell them for $5 a pair. Here's a bin of 40 pairs of shoes at $5 a pair. Have at it. So that's another option. Kind of sounds like a lot of work for not a lot of profit, but at least would allow me to recoup my money and maybe make a couple bucks on each item too. So there's that. And of course I could just donate a whole bunch of stuff. So that's what I've come up with. I would love to know if you have stayed with me through this video, this dramatic video, all the way to the end. What do you think that I should do? Drop it in the comments and let me know, would you? So different kind of video today, bit of a reality check. What it really illustrates to me, if I could summarize it in one sentence, it's be aware when you are in your own, running your own business. Be aware that there are external risks that can have a significant impact on your business that have nothing whatsoever to do with you. That's what happened here. Now, thankfully, I do not rely on this eBay income to put food on my table or to pay my bills. I am retired from a career, and I was doing this as more of a side hustle for travel money, fun money, movie money, eating out money, whatever you want to call it. So it doesn't impact me personally in that way, but I know that this change has impacted many other Canadian and other international sellers who do rely on this for income. So if there's a word of caution in here, it's what all the financial planners would tell you is you need to have an emergency fund. You need to have some savings. You need to, build a business that can potentially sustain something like this that can actually happen. So I'll be fine. I'll be okay. I'm still going to keep making YouTube one way or the other. You know what? I can do a lot of videos around sharing things that I've learned, teaching things about how to be a good seller on eBay. So I'm thinking about taking it in that direction. Is that something you'd watch? Let me know. Anyway, I will close with, as I always say, thank you all so much for watching. My channel has done so well with the last few videos, and I am so grateful to all of you who are watching and commenting and liking and all my new subscribers. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I will be back. Bye.